What would happen to your body if you decided to never sleep again? And I'm not talking about staying awake for 2 or 3 days. I'm talking about literally trying to never sleep again. Here I can already give you a kind of paradoxical spoiler. If you try not to sleep anymore, eventually you will end up sleeping forever, if you know what I mean. But for us to understand the consequences of not getting any more sleep, we need to know, why is it so important to sleep? If we think of the human body as a machine, sleep time is the time to recharge the battery, just like your cell phone. And this is essential to keep this machine running perfectly, with all the gears adjusted to each other. In other words, sleep is necessary to ensure the balance of our physical, metabolic, immunological, and even psychological aspects. A good night's sleep helps us reduce stress, increase concentration, maintain a healthy weight, and is good for our memory, mood, and appearance. For all these reasons, getting the correct amount of sleep every night is extremely important. But what is this amount of hours? If you are definitely an enemy of sleep, this video was made for you. You must have definitely heard that everyone needs to sleep 8 hours a day, right? But it's not quite like that. This calculation needs a number of factors, including the person's age. For an adult, something between 7 and 8 hours of quality sleep can be a good measure. But for teenagers, for example, the recommendation is 8 to 10 hours. As for children, daily sleep can reach 13 hours, and for babies, specialists recommend up to 16 hours of sleep every day. But we can't always get all the sleep we need. A recent study showed that our sleep lasts, on average, 7 hours and 48 minutes. The problem is that 20% of people sleep less than the minimum recommended 7 hours for adults. In other words, there are so many people sleeping a lot that this average actually ends up going up. And tell me in the comments how many hours you sleep per night. But what are the problems that can affect people's sleep? What makes a person sleep much less than necessary? Sometimes it is literally the lack of time, a demanding routine with work, study, long hours in commutes, in addition to the need to get home and take care of the family. All of this can result in not having enough time to get the sleep they need. In other cases, there are illnesses that can affect our sleep. Some of them even make a person sleep too much. This is the case with narcolepsy, a disorder that causes excessive daytime sleepiness, even when the person has slept very well all night. It is caused by an imbalance of certain chemicals in our brain. And as a consequence, you could be casually talking to someone, riding a bus, or doing anything else, when out of nowhere an overwhelming sleepiness hits you, skipping the initial slow wave phase and going straight to REM sleep, which normally takes hours to reach. It is something so serious that can cause cataplexy, causing sudden muscle weakness, which makes the person collapse. Another mysterious problem affecting the sleep of some people is the famous sleepwalking. It is a disorder that occurs when a person is sleeping but can perform motor activities, like walking, eating, and in some cases talking. You have seen in a movie a character wandering with their arms outstretched like a zombie. In real life, I hate to disappoint you. It's not quite like that. The person usually walks normally with their eyes open, with a neutral expression and a somewhat distant look in their eyes. The causes are still not fully known. What we do know is that this is much more common in childhood. In adults, sleepwalking is often associated with depression, fatigue, stress, anxiety, fever, or the use of alcohol, drugs, and some medications. In general, the person goes back to sleep, but sleepwalking can be dangerous if the person hits obstacles and gets hurt. So, besides being scary for those who are awake, it's always worth seeking treatment if you have sleepwalking. And speaking of frightening problems, have you ever heard of sleep paralysis? Or perhaps have you ever suffered from it? It's a desperate feeling that can really happen when we are about to wake up. In fact, our mind is already active, but our body is still actually asleep. And with that, we are aware that we are awake, but we simply cannot move. It's as if we are somehow trapped in our own sleep, unable to wake up. Fortunately, this lasts at most a few seconds or a few minutes. But perhaps the most frightening sleep-related illness is an extremely rare type of insomnia. It is FFI, or fatal familial insomnia. Familial because it is a hereditary disease. In other words, it affects the descendants of the same family, but it is really very rare. Only about 70 families in the world have been diagnosed. And it's fatal because, well, it's a type of insomnia so severe that it leads to death. And it all happens because of a genetic mutation that starts to manifest during adulthood. Those with FFI begin to have difficulty sleeping and quickly start to show mental confusion, uncoordinated movements, hallucinations, and within months or a few years, the person dies. But as I mentioned, this is a very, very rare condition. So don't get it into your head that you have this disease just because you saw a video on YouTube. In any case, if you suffer from any symptoms that disrupt your sleep, it's always important to seek medical help. Now, everything I have brought up so far are examples of how sleep can be affected by health problems. But what if someone simply chooses to mess up their own sleep on purpose? Surprisingly, some people have volunteered for tests investigating this question. A famous test that helped us understand the effects of sleep deregulation was the cave experiment by French geologist Michel Siffre. He spent 60 days isolated in total darkness in the French Alps to study how his body would react to complete darkness. If there is no access to sunlight, does the human body still function in perfect 24-hour cycles in synchronization with the Earth's rotation? And the answer they discovered is no. The window in which he stayed awake between the two sleep periods ranged from 6 to 40 hours. His biological clock was totally changed. He left the cave believing it was still August 20th, but it was already September 14th. The same test was conducted, but with a group of 15 people a few years ago, and the result was quite similar. The volunteers estimated that they had spent 30 days in a cave, but in reality, they had spent 40. This proves that without sunlight and the natural darkness of night, our body completely changes its sense of time. But how would it react to the lack of sleep? In other words, going back to the question at the very beginning of the video, what happens if you simply never ever sleep again? At all. When 18 hours have passed since you last woke up, your motor reflexes start to become impaired. The effect is similar to being slightly intoxicated. More precisely, it's equivalent to having around 0.05% alcohol in the blood. After 24 hours awake, it's as if this rate has already doubled. Our reaction time becomes equivalent to having 0.1% alcohol in the blood. That's why driving while sleepy can be as dangerous as driving drunk. And throughout the second day awake, our brain enters a kind of energy-saving mode, just like our cell phone when the battery is running low. As a result, it starts to alter its activity patterns. For this reason, our behavior can become more impulsive and even more aggressive. It is also possible that we take micronaps without noticing, lasting a few seconds. And this can be extremely dangerous if you are walking on the street or driving. After 48 hours awake, the body stops metabolizing glucose properly. Remember those biology classes in school? So, to perform any activity, our brain uses energy carried by a molecule called ATP. With the breakdown of this molecule, another substance called adenosine remains, which induces sleep. So, our brain detects the excess adenosine and sends a signal to our body to rest. If we don't actually pay attention to this cautionary message, our body feels the need to replenish glucose. That's why, after so much time without sleep, an insatiable craving for sweets can indeed arise. From the third day without sleep, the situation becomes more severely critical. Even daylight causes eye irritation, making them extremely sensitive. On the fourth day, a person can have hallucinations and show psychosis. People became so paranoid that they even began to doubt their own identity. And from 5 days onward, it is even difficult to say what might happen. This is because very few people have managed to stay awake for that long. Though rare, there are impressive cases of people staying awake up to twice as long. Actually, the record for longest sleepless time is 264 hours. That's 11 days and 4 hours. What does 11 days awake do to you? This was the case for American student Randy Gardner, who still reports lasting effects from this experiment, like incurable insomnia. In fact, the risks of staying awake for so long are so great that Guinness removed this category from the record book. And there are even stories of people who have died after staying up many nights in a row. This was the case of a Chinese fan who, a few years ago, tried to watch all the Euro Cup games over consecutive weeks during the early hours, and whose supposed cause of death was sleep deprivation combined with excessive consumption of alcohol and tobacco. All of this helps to prove the importance of good nights of sleep for our health. So much so that one of the world's leading experts on the subject, Harvard neuroscientist Matthew Walker, says that our sleep is our superpower. According to him, the more we sleep, the longer we live. But it has to be very good quality sleep. If you sleep a lot, but the sleep is poor in quality, it won't help. That's why he gives 6 essential tips that I'm going to share with you now. The first is regularity. Try to go to sleep and wake up at the same time, both on weekdays and weekends. This helps our brain get used to this pattern. One tip is to set an alarm to wake up but also to go to sleep. The second tip is the temperature. Ideally, when it's time to sleep, your room should be neither too hot nor too cold. Walker recommends a temperature of approximately 18 degrees Celsius. The third point is darkness. Turn off screens when you go to bed, and have a curtain that makes the room very dark when you sleep. If you find it better, then use a sleep mask. The important thing is that there is no light when you sleep. Fourthly, it is important to get out of bed shortly after waking up, without lingering for too long. That's because, according to Walker, our brain needs to associate the bed with sleeping. So when you lie down at night, it will be easier to fall asleep. The fifth tip is to avoid alcohol and caffeine starting from late afternoon. The researcher says that these substances are enemies of our rest and should be cut out so our body can rest properly. And finally, it's necessary to create a relaxation routine. In other words, it's no use thinking that after a super busy day, you can just throw yourself into bed and try to sleep. Our brain doesn't work like a switch that can be turned on and off instantly. The process of falling asleep is more like landing a plane. It has to happen calmly, gradually, and in a way that is the smoothest way possible. That's why so many people talk about sleep hygiene, a series of good practices, like the ones I just mentioned, that improve your sleep. By following these steps, you have everything you need to improve your nights of sleep. These are simple measures. They will boost the quality of decades of your life. This is not an exaggeration. After all, if we sleep for approximately about 8 out of the 24 hours in a day, that essentially means we sleep for 1/3 of our days and also of our lives. A person who lives up to 80 years, for example, will spend almost 30 years sleeping. But don't think that this is a waste of time. Quite the opposite. It is indeed thanks to well-slept nights that you will have the energy to live a very healthy, happy life full of vitality. So, thank you very much, see you next time, and have a good night.